what you do is as important as how you do it, right? And we as creatives in our industry are really trained, to focus on a lot of what, but understanding how things happen, right? Like how to keep the morale, right? Like making sure that the team that is working with you and around you feel happy and feel great and feel an ownership of, the work that they're in.
Welcome to Real Creative Leadership, a video podcast produced by the Stoke Group and hosted by me, Adam Morgan. Today we're going to be talking about the path from creative to CEO and how to engage that next generation through what my guest calls next-gen centricity. I'm thrilled to welcome Karan Dang to the podcast. Karan is a creative leader whose career journey has taken him from agency to CEO. He's led teams at Disney and at Walmart, and now he's the CEO and co-founder of Dang, a consultancy agency for modern brands. So first of all, welcome to the show, Karan. You run your own business, you speak business, you speak what we say is speak khaki. It used to be like suit, like everyone was wearing a suit, but now it's like business people always wear khaki. So you understand that, and you learn but you lead from a place of creativity. So I'm excited for you to give that balance of what it's like to be a CEO and speaking business, as well as understanding the audience and creativity and building all the right creative ideas to share with that audience. So that was a lot from me. Let's start. Why don't you just go ahead and talk to our audience about your journey, where you came from, how creativity has been a part of your life, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. I would just maybe start probably, answering your khaki comment, right? Because I feel like as creatives in our industry, too often we are disillusioned by the word creative and what creativity means, right? And a lot of times I think we mistake it for creative indulgence, right? Like 99 percent of the times, the way corporate structures are built, our school of creativity really exists to propel, business growth, right? And that can be done, I guess, through like brand building, building an emotional connection, right? Persuading audiences, right? So like we are really commercial creatives or communication artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always believed, and, in speaking and understanding khaki, right? But like not losing the sight that our creativity is what sets businesses and brand apart. It's really understanding, recognizing, and appreciating where we sit in the ecosystem.
No, and it's true. Like you look at fine artists, it's a totally different world. We are commercial artists. We are driving business through creativity. And so there is that unique role that we have.
Yeah. And now I guess in this role, right, and in partnership with Shruti, who's my partner, I feel really great about, bringing that ability and that new kind of creativity, and that mindset, right, to really build that playbook, for our company, putting our POV out there and really using our creative expression to shape our company. Historically, I was born in India. I moved over, at the age 17 to pursue electrical engineering, University of Arizona in Tucson.
That's awesome. Same here. I started in engineering as well. And then it's like, nope, I need to invent stuff in different ways. Yeah.
I did 3 years and it just wasn't my calling. I moved over to Singapore to join a really cool art school, LaSalle College of the Arts, studied advertising there. And I worked in like network agencies, for the first 10 years of my career, Gray, BBDO, JWT, TBWA, but really grew at the forefront of the digital revolution that was happening in our industry. Ended up building some really cool products and services and campaigns, using the power of digital storytelling, to really build work that is going to be talked about, right? I mean, if you remember back in, early 2000s, right? Like that was all the rage. With the work Crispin was doing, with the work, Modernista back in the day was doing. So I moved over to Deutsch LA, to the States to join Deutsch LA, and really got firsthand experience into American advertising culture, fairly traditional agency. But I really, I met my partner, Daniel Barak, there, and we ended up doing some really cool and innovative work, it was such a fun playground, using technology, using storytelling. We pioneered the use of AI in advertising back in 2016, 2017, created a really cool experience for Volkswagen where you make car sounds, and that, that AI brain would turn those car sounds into actual footage of the car, going left and right for Volkswagen, it's called Unleash Your R. I would say that period in my career, I ended up doing some really prolific work that got a lot of attention in the world. It really helped me identify and establish my creative POV, at that point that I actually, use until today, and I feel like that was when the genesis of next gen centricity was born, I guess for me as well. I never articulated it that way. And
Well, maybe articulate. Tell us what that is. What is next gen centricity so that our audience understands?
So, I have a vast body of work. And, when we started looking at the niche we wanted to go in, and we really wanted to specialize our business, in a particular niche, with our venture, we looked at two things, what are we passionate about and what are our strengths, right? Like, in both of those things, led us to the mission, which you were mentioning earlier, which is modernizing iconic global brands by helping them, build an authentic connection with the next generation of consumers. Uh, and for shorthand, it's next gen centricity. It's really like the shorthand for it, right? And it's really like summarizing those words. And I think for me, the best way to explain is like when I wrote the manifesto for what it is, right? And that's actually sits on our website. It actually goes like, next gen centricity is where the official language is video. TikTok is the search engine of choice. Metaverse is the town square. Social feeds are the shopping mall. Creators are the storefronts. AI is your concierge, where strategy is value driven and content is purpose led, right? Like for me, that is really the essence of what next gen centricity is, because that's where the next generation of consumers sit, live, breathe, eat.
I'm sure there's certain brands that are focused on youth, but my guess is it's for all brands, right? There's a lot that you can still take from it because everyone's a consumer.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, right, like while next gen is the focus, this is how the digital habits are, right? Like we have a 5-year-old daughter who can't wait to press the skip button every single time an ad comes on her thing, right? And we as an industry are spending billions of dollars, stuffing stuff into that skip button, right? So there's something broken, right? And it's not just my 5-year-old. The last time you probably saw a YouTube ad, right? Did you wait long to see the whole thing, or were you like, no, I want to go watch the content that I came here for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's a mindset, I think. We are articulating it, and like trying to really commercialize it around the next generation of consumers, but it's just the mindset that exists today.
See, it's not just, so from what I'm understanding, it's not just the next gen, but also just consumers are changing, right? Our customer centric approach is changing. So it's like we've got to adapt not just for the youth, but for everyone who's hitting that skip button.
The paradigm has shifted. While next gen is the focus, that is really helping us define how every other generation acts and behave, because they are catching up with that generation. I think it's just how the new age works, and that's what we are here to serve.
Well, that's awesome. I want to dig in a little bit of your history that you brought up, where you're like leading the creative at big brands like Disney and Walmart, and then deciding to go out and do your own thing. And we've talked on this show a lot about so just some background. Real Creative Leadership did a survey a year or so ago where we talked to hundreds of creative leaders around the country of what's their career path, where are they going next? And there was a third of them that are just like, I just want to stay as a creative director, creative lead at a company, be done. And there was a third that as they got later in their career, they're like, forget it. I don't want all this bureaucracy. They go back to just being like a freelance creative director or freelance something. Mm-hmm. But there was another chunk that was interesting, because the natural path would be, you move up and either become a chief technology officer or a chief marketing officer. But there was most of them that they jumped straight to CEO. And we saw a huge pattern of creatives, because today's the experience economy. They would just jump and start a startup or start their own company or start something else. So maybe tell us more about that, your experience of why you decided to just say screw it all, I'm just going to go start my own thing. I want to drive this thing. I want to be in charge, and just taking on that mantle of just being the CEO of a new company.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I can't take all this credit. This credit really goes to my partner in life and work, Shruti,
okay.
My partner.
Let's get her on the show then real quick. I'm teasing. That's awesome.
No, we should. I mean, so she really, she comes from fintech world and has been a product designer there. It was really her idea and vision to start something of our own, something that we can build and shape together. We have done a few creative projects together. We built a house together. We built a few rental properties together, and you really use our, complementary skill set as creatives, to build those things together. We designed this place together. And we were really looking for what our next creative endeavor can be that we can do together as partners, and we were like, why not make this our career, and that's how the genesis of this idea came about to be.
So some creatives would be a little afraid with starting a company because they're like, oh, all the finances and all the business stuff and all that. Talk to me more about lessons learned now that you're owning a company. What were the hard things that you had to figure out, or what are the things that you're so glad you have that knowledge now because it's like changed your perspective on the world.
To be very honest, we were in the same space. It was just like, how are we going to do it, right? Like, what does incorporation mean? What is an LLC versus an S corp, right? Like, do we need an IP lawyer? You know what? Like, there are like 100,000 different types of lawyers, that you get. There are 100 different types of finances. I think today, and we're 3 months in, so we're fairly still new. But I would say the day to day we operate this thing, it's as simple as, right? Like, if you're raising a child, right? Or if you're raising another human, or like like kind of living in this world, it's how you run a team, it's how you build a team, it's how you grow a team, right? If you're doing your personal finances, it's exactly the same way, right, that you do your corporate finances, right? It's just like at a different scale, and there are different terms that you need to learn. But I think keeping an eager eye, understanding every single thing that we need to know that exists in our humanity or has existed, it's all there out there on the internet. So it's just like having that childlike spirit of, yes, I can do it. That mindset really helped us.
No, I love that, the mindset.
Yeah.
Because after all, this podcast in part is meant to mentor younger creatives and help them become better creative leaders and develop some of that. And the way you're putting it is, it's just so like, oh, it's just easy. You don't need to stress about that. You don't need to worry. Like creative leadership and all these other finances and F's Corp and all the things that sound scary or weird, like they're really not that, they're not that tricky. It's just a mindset of looking at it with a creative perspective, right?
I mean, it's as scary as like the first time you get briefed on a campaign, right? Or a project, right? And you go like, hey, you don't know what's gonna come out of it, right? It's you put it through your framework, right? And everybody, right? Like the really great creatives are who understand their framework and utilize it, when they need it, right? Like the ones who are up and coming, they're constantly finding what their framework is, right? Like, I mean, I always say talent is nothing but hard work. So it's just like applying your framework to what you're doing. And like we can't like just like a creative campaign, like we can't tell what's going to work, what's not going to work. I mean, we have that inkling and we have that gut feeling, right? And so we inform ourselves with data, we inform ourselves with insights, we inform ourselves with like what's happening out there in culture, right? It's a similar process. So we're just taking a framework and applying it to a business.
All right, we've been talking with Karan Dang about his approach to creative leadership as the CEO of his own consultancy. And here's my big takeaway. It's really not that scary. If you want to make that leap from creative to CEO, you just apply the same creative skills and tools that you've already learned to something that aligns with your core values and creative vision. In reality, it's just a mindset shift. All right, now we're going to dig into Karan's framework for creative leadership. And I want you to pay attention and listen to the 5 principles he says can help anyone advance in their creative leadership journey. Well, now I want to know, what's your framework then? Like, what's your approach to creative leadership? How do you do it uniquely or differently, or is it the same building blocks that you used before? Let's talk a little bit more about that.
I think for me, creative leadership, and like I really developed my creative leadership days. And again, I was a creative leader or leader of creativity before Disney, but like Disney was really where I understood creative leadership. And it's like very nuanced, right? But it's like 2 separate things, right?
Totally.
I think I sum it up in these 5 principles, right? That I've learned from my mentors, from people out there, right? From working with just like these, like, geniuses, over at Disney, and those 5 are, create, like, one is like creative leadership is not about, what your team does for you, but what you can do for your team, right? Like being of that service mentality, right? Where people can thrive, where people are empowered to bring their own creativity grows. I feel as your leader, it grows your creativity. Too often, I feel in our industry, what happens is we grow up coming up with ideas and we get so precious about every single thing that we do that even when we are high up there, we forget our place. Our high up there is our job is empowerment, right? It's making sure that everybody else, right? Like that's how you multiply your superpowers, is by making sure everybody, can come up or has the understanding of a framework that you have established, right? Like that's why having a clear aligned vision and, telling people, to go from A to B, right? That's where, as a leader, you want to go, and then let them choose their path, right? Which brings me to my second point, which is autonomy is the single most effective tool when it comes to building a strong team, and positive morale, right? Like it's not money, it's not, any sort of like job satisfaction, it's not throwing these fancy parties or giving free food, it's autonomy. Every creative out there, like they yearn for, getting some creative autonomy, right? So as a leader, if you can go like, hey, we are at A, we want to go to B, now go figure out your path, how to go there, and let them go choose their paths, I think is the second point for me. I think the third one for me, which I feel like I should actually get it tattooed because somebody, one of my mentors, Joe Rand, told me, and I was struggling in the beginning at Disney, to understand, what do they talk about, when they say leadership, right? And one of my mentors told me, which is like, what you do is half as important in the entire scheme of things. So what you do is as important as how you do it. How being empathy, how being, having a high EQ, how being making sure your teams feel empowered and all of those other things, right? Building relationships, creating a culture of positivity and harmony and, happiness, right? I think that for me was a switching point in my creative leadership journey to go like, because as ad agency creative, it's all about just put your head down and do the work, which is the what, right? Like, I mean, even remember BBDO's tagline, which is the work, right? It's not that. It's how that work come about to be, how everybody around you, feels when the work comes out, right? And how the process has gone is equally as important as what you do. The fourth one is really about embracing diversity, which is, and when I say diversity, it's not just race or religion or background. It's diversity in abilities, it's diversity in mindset, it's diversity in different skill sets. It's so important to unlocking new ideas, inspiration, possibilities. I mean, imagine, right, like how boring it would be if everybody, looks, talks, eats, thinks the same way, right? Then we get into singularity, right? And I think creativity is, breaking away, right? Presenting something new, something unique.
New combinations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think lastly, I feel like as a leader, our job is to eliminate, roadblocks away, right? Not be one. Often too many hands, I feel, shaping the work makes the work safe and weak. Most often the best ideas, it really comes, when you don't have a lot of eyeballs on it, and a lot of hands shaping it, right? So it's making sure that your job as a leader is not just to write. Like, I mean, I remember back in the day in one of the agencies, just like write scripts and scripts and scripts, and it's like 20,000 different scripts, and my ECD will start taking it over and he'll write scripts. I'm like, that's not their job, right? Your job is to make sure you're creating a playing field for creatives to thrive and play. So those are my essential, like, summary of my five creative leadership, that I use in my framework.
Love it. Love it. There's so much to dig into there. And I don't know if we'd have an episode on each one of those topics. And frankly, we have on some of them. But yeah, I just want to highlight a few things just to make sure our audience understands that. Like, number one, it is hard because most of our career as creatives, it's about us winning whatever award, doing whatever work. And it's just like you focus on you and your portfolio and your growth and your skills and all that kind of stuff. And there is a switch. I really feel like there is a switch when someone finally gets to the point, because I'll get so many people who want to kind of become a creative director or creative leader. And it's like, well, I'm the best. I'm the this. I'm the, it's like I should be at the top of the heap. And it's a switch where it's like, it's no longer about you.
Yeah.
It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about the team. It's about the work. It's about the brand. It's about something else.
Yeah.
And giving up that ego is such an important part of creative leadership. So I just wanted to highlight that because you said it really, really, really well.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, you do need that ego in the beginning, right? Like, to come up and climb up the ranks, you do need to build a brand around you, right? And that's why essentially what ends up happening is a lot of creatives just take that framework as the framework for success throughout your career. But what I feel more young creatives need to learn is that at some point that framework changes. You need to adopt new ways in, right? And bring these new learnings in to kind of enhance your framework. So it can still be about your leadership, but your leadership doesn't mean, it's about the ideas that you have come up with. It's about, the environment you have created for creativity to thrive, right? And like, I think that's how you really become a leader of leaders, right? Not just a leader of creativity.
There was something else you said about leadership where you said like talent is created through repetition or something like that. Like talent is made.
Oh,
what was
like
that?
it's talent is hard work, right? Growing up, like, I did engineering and I suddenly switched over, and I've always come from a science background, just like a good Indian kid, But when I went to art school, everybody came there from a very art background, right? Like, they were plugged into creativity, and I wasn't. I was really interested in it, but I was never, I didn't know all these famous fine artists, or I didn't know how to even write like this long as, like art thesis. I think one thing I realized very early on was every single thing, like, we can be whoever we want to be, right? It's just, setting and aligning your vision to like, okay, I want to become a really good creative, right? And it like 3 years that I was in that school, like, I mean, I was probably the first one to get a job, coming from that background to that, because like I just went really in my deep focus mode to go like, it's hard work, it's repetition, like I want to learn, and the back in the day it used to be archives, right? Like we used to just like go print test
Yep.
print test after print test, right? Like, and I'm just like, how did they come up with the idea? It's not just how great that idea is, right? Like deconstructing it, breaking it down. I remember I met my old CD in Cannes this year, and I used to go knock on his door every single day with an idea. It's almost like, like going to doctor's office or like going checking with your, accountability coach. And I'm just like, I would knock down and go like, hey, here's an idea. And he used to give me feedback every day. And I used to like wait outside his office to make sure he gives me feedback on on my ideas that I used to come up with. Just to quickly sketch up, these print ad ideas and like kind of show and get feedback and then improve and then improve and improve. And that repetition, that hard work that I've put in like really helped me land my job. It helped me, do the work that I'm doing, right? I mean, again, I started in print ads, and then I was like, okay, digital revolution, I need to learn that, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
okay, how do I do that? And then I'm just like, I started hanging out with folks who were, like really trailblazing, in that field. At that point, I started understanding, talking to them, exchanging ideas, coming up with those ideas. I mean, even till today, right? Like, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur right now, and I'm not hanging out in a lot of like ad conferences, as much as I would. I'm actually going to these like like AI summits, in the Silicon Beach here, right? And I'm just hanging out and I'm looking at all these entrepreneurs, right? Like how are they acting? How are they functioning? How are they coming up with their ideas and how are they implementing those ideas? How are they going out and putting decks together to get funding for their businesses and really try to understand, learn, and apply, right? And I feel like there's that belief in me, and that's my framework to go like, maybe that will work for me one day, right? Because there's something new that I have to offer, and there's something new that I'm trying to do. So I'm in education mode right now.
It's so true, and it's that creative curiosity. I think that I relate to your whole story, and that's such a great example. I've told so many friends and family and employees of like, you got to find that passion, that drive, and that creative curiosity. And it may drive you for the craft in the beginning of your career, but because a lot of people may say, oh, you just become an old fuddy-duddy to brand and you're giving up because you're not doing all the same stuff you did earlier in your career. But you have to realize that creative curiosity changes. Just like you're now curious about, it's not about going to the ad
Yeah,
shows, right? It's about going to the AI show or what's the next big thing. And
yeah,
how do you take that creative curiosity and focus it on building a business and understanding other business leaders and
yeah,
understanding AI? And for me, being brand side, it's like, man, all the stuff that I craved early on as a creative of like the big idea, the big campaign. Now it's like, what's the big storytelling? How am I going to take this brand and turn it and make it stand for something, right? How
yeah.
am I going to take all these pieces of content that we do in it and make them feel like they're connecting to humans in a new way? And so anyhow, love that you're moving this, like taking that curiosity to the CEO level, taking it to business, and it makes it more, I guess, accessible for the rest of us to like just see, yeah, we can do it. We can just take that same little spirit of creative curiosity and just start going for something else and learning about it. So Karan, tell me a little bit more about maybe some valuable piece of advice that you've been given, whether it's from a mentor or an old boss or something like that. Just what are other things that you've learned on your creative career that have helped you?
What you do is as important as how you do it, right? And we as creatives in our industry are really trained, to focus on a lot of what but understanding how things happen, right? Like how to keep the morale, right? Like we are not, I mean, I always call it like we're not in these short sprints, we are in the long marathon, right? So making sure that the team that is working with you and around you feel happy and feel great and feel an ownership of, the work that they're in, right? um, making sure that we work with real people with real human needs, who have kids, who have other priorities in life, who have family, who have friends, right? Like they have their traditions, they have their holidays, right? Like how are you catering for all of that to create an environment where everybody feels valued and everybody feels seen? Having a high EQ. I mean, I'll give you a little point where, like, I mean, I joined the Walt Disney Company to help build their digital creative center of excellence. And at a certain point, there was a merger that happened with consumer products and parks experiences, right? And they asked me to lead all of creative at that point, because again, back in the day used to be antiquated, digital versus traditional. Now, I mean, like now everything is digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at that point, I inherited a large team, which were primarily, male focused, male dominant team. At the same time, we had our daughter, and I took an executive pledge, which was, I'm going to create a team which is equally representative. In a year and a half, I built a team that was 49% female at all levels, down from an intern up to a GCD, who reported into me, getting them in, getting them onboarded, but then also creating an environment where they can thrive, where they can be heard, right? A lot of cultures and places are created by people who, have been in that culture for a very long time, right? Like, so if you're infusing new talent in, how do you look at certain parts of the culture, and how do you tweak it, right? Like, how do you make sure that everybody feels seen and everybody feels heard, right? So I think for me, that thing of, like, how you do is as important as what you do was very, very important. And I feel like, somehow that was the shift where I'm like, okay, I need to be so focused on the how part, not just create a great campaign, but like how those campaigns are created, and like literally break down the journey, and see what are some of the pain points everyone is feeling, and then how do you fix it. I would say like 30% of my time, went into, one-on-ones with team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's keeping that touch, right? Like 30% went into HR and finance meetings, right? And then whatever 30% was left, I would be in that creative space, creating and helping propel creativity. But again, like before that, it was maybe 100% creativity.
That's awesome advice for those who are either starting their journey or in their journey to becoming a creative leader. Something else I want to talk about as far as like relating to different audiences or different journeys is we talked earlier on how you're focused on the next generation, right? New younger audiences.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit more about what principles guide you as you're developing work for them. Like, what do you think about? How do you react? How do you reach them? How do you connect?
Hmm. I think it goes back to what we spoke about, right? It's that curiosity, the creative curiosity. At Dang, we have a fancy word for it. We call it the art of digital anthropology, right? Because that
Yeah.
curiosity now lives, all over the internet, right? So we have, team members, right, whose job is to, be part of those Discord servers, right? Go join those, Substacks, right? Like, be on TikTok all the time, right? And gather those insights, right? Like, go on those subreddits, like double click into those to find, right? Like, it's not rocket science. The answers and the opportunities all exist out there, right? It's just putting in the effort and going into places and spaces where the next generation of consumer thrives, and understanding, their needs, right? Like, I mean, part of a content series that I do, I interviewed like a Gen Z folk a week, after that. Like, I interviewed somebody last week where, she was talking about like how brands kind of, like represent the Gen Z audience as almost like this cringe, right? Like, uh, that's so true, because a lot of times we come from a place of, oh, this is a new audience, let's make fun of them, right? And let's use their lingo, right? Like, suddenly change those things, right? But it's understanding why certain words exist in their, vocabulary, right? Like, why certain aesthetic, lives in their, like visual vernacular, right? It's understanding the reason, right? Like, the next generation of consumer probably had it hardest, right? Like, they saw the, they were probably born, or, like very young at the age of, in 2008 2009 crisis. They have seen, uh, a lot of the wars that have happened, that America had participated in. Maybe softening it by saying participated, but they have seen, they've lived, they were ready to go into the workforce, when COVID hit, right? They are now, with like this, what, the blackout Monday that happened, this Monday, right? Like, they are seeing, inflation, they're seeing recession. So that audience has gone through a lot. They have, a lot of those experiences shape their identity, shape their personalities, and in turn shape those cultures, right? And all of that exists out there because they are the most vocal audience out there, right? Like, they are
Hmm.
tweeting, talking, posting about that stuff everywhere. So it's just keeping an eye out on that, and I think it's being at that forefront, of where that culture is being built. The three tenets, I would say, of our company is the culture, that they consume, the communities that they live in, and the commerce habits that they have, right? Like, that's how we shape everything. We put everything through that lens, and that's how we, I feel like we've created that model around that.
That's awesome. Just be curious. Go be where they are. Do what they do. Listen to what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
that. That's a great answer of like how you can dig in. So I know we're near the end here. What final advice do you have for anyone who's new to creative leadership? What, anything that you've come across in your career that you're like, this is just what you need to understand when it comes to becoming a creative leader?
I think one is understanding not only the consumer paradigm has shifted, the paradigm for our industry is shifting as well, right? Like I remember a time standing in front of the Palais at Cannes, and a lot of my peers are talking down on influencers, like, who cares? Influencer is a buzzword, right? Or talking down on the cloud tech, or talking down on the data and personalization, right? Look at now, like now all those things are running our industry, right? Like our industry, as you and I grew up in, has is not dying. Everybody keeps on talking about it's dying. It's not dying. It has somehow just become the legacy industry, right? There's this whole new forefront of what our industry has now become, which is, right, like it's creator led, right? It's data led, right? It's personalization led. With AI, it's going to revolutionize even more. So understanding, right, for a lot of young creators who are coming into this business to keep an eye out and see how and where those innovations are happening, right? And be at the forefront of it, right? The power is in their hand because everybody before them do not have an idea. They're still putting their old ways of working. So I would say one. I would say the second thing is ask, ask for help, ask for resources, ask for advice, always have a keen, learning mindset, and understand that leadership of creativity is very different from creative leadership, right? And making sure that you take an active interest in it.
No, I love it. That's a good place to end. That's been a theme of this whole talk of like whether from creative to CEO, it doesn't matter. You just need to put some interest into it, have some creative curiosity, and just dig in and learn and grow. And I think that's such a good message. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on the podcast and for being a part of real creative leadership in our community. We appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
As always, you can find me at adamwmorgan.com. And finally, this show is produced by the Stoke Group, a full-service digital agency that specializes in content marketing, video, and interactive experiences. So if you're looking for a partner for strategy or content or anything else, visit thestokegroup.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.